So recently, Elon Musk was on Tucker Carlson Tonight with some big information that we all need to pay attention to, talking about the collapse of civilization. So pro-choice and pro-life, listen up.
But you think that we take our existence here for granted?
Yeah, I think
there are threats to it.
I just think we should not assume that civilization is robust. And if you look at the history of civilizations, the rise and fall of the ancient Egyptians.
Someone who has my own heart and reads history.
The ancient Sumerians, Rome, there's throughout the world there've been the rise and fall of many civilizations. So there's an arc. There's sort of a life cycle arc to civilizations, just as there is to individual humans.
Yes.
And I think we just want to make sure that we have civilization go onward and upward. And that's, for example, why I'm concerned about decreasing birth rates and
So are we, Elon, the pro-life movement. So are we. This is something we've been talking about for years, that our country, America, now is actually below replacement value. So to keep your population in a country, every woman is supposed to give birth to 2.1 children. I know it's like a little bit impossible, but people like me, have 4. We make up the difference. So 2 children. Now, since COVID, we're actually below replacement rate in America. Europe has been below replacement rate for decades. This is a disaster coming.
The fact that, for example, Japan had twice as many deaths last year as births.
Think about that, all you liberal pro-lifers who are join me in saying you're against abortion, yay, but then say, okay, we need a bigger social safety net and we want more government programs giving money to people. Think about what you just said. In Japan, 2-to-1 deaths to births. If in America, when they set up the Social Security system, the goal was that 10 workers would pay for one person's Social Security. That number is below 5 now. That kind of makes Social Security insolvent. You can't have a welfare society if you don't have workers who are actually paying the taxes to fund all of the government programs.
They're a leading indicator.
Can I say, and you've written and talked a lot about this, but can I just ask you to pause just for a parenthetical note? Why is that? I mean, the urge to have sex and to procreate is, after breathing and eating, the most basic urge.
Yes.
How has it been?
I'm reminded that every time I step on a college campus.
Yes.
How has it been subverted?
Well, it's just in the past we could rely upon simple limbic system rewards
Yes.
in order to procreate. But once you have birth control and abortions and whatnot, now you can still satisfy the limbic instinct, but not procreate.
Yes, because birth control, Elon, and abortion fundamentally changed what sex was designed for. Not only a unitive aspect between husband and wife, but also a procreative aspect where husband and wife joined with God, the creator of the universe, to make a unique, whole, living human being that never existed before and will never exist again. This is significant. This is why when in the pro-life movement we'll talk about abortion and some people say, don't ever bring up birth control. But often you find yourselves having to have that conversation, because the reason we have legalized abortion in America and throughout many parts of the world is because we first legalized and allowed birth control. Because once birth control was introduced in the market and said, hey, you can have all the fun you want, have all the great sex, which, by the way, I would say married people statistically have better sex than unmarried people. But that's the sell, right? You can have as much sex as you want. You don't have to get married to your partner. Have fun. There's nothing bad that's going to happen to you from engaging in these behaviors. That natural biological process and that natural consequence of heterosexual sex, of creating a unique, whole, living human life, doesn't have to be there. Once you separated sex and the fun of sex from that procreative aspect, and we all know birth control isn't 100% effective. Even the makers of birth control admit that. We all know someone who's gotten pregnant or was conceived when their parents were actively using birth control. Then you also had to introduce abortion because of the whoopsies. And abortion became a backup birth control method, which the UK's largest abortion vendor, BPAS, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, has said openly that, abortion is a birth control method when, your regular method lets you down. And even the Guttmacher Institute, Planned Parenthood's research arm, named after second president of Planned Parenthood, Alan Guttmacher, who was the vice president of the American Eugenics Society, they have even said that, half of all women who seek abortions actively report that they were using contraceptive at the time. Because you have birth control, therefore you have abortion. But keep going, Elon.
We haven't yet evolved to deal with that because this is all fairly recent, the last 50 years or so.
That's an interesting statement. We haven't yet evolved to deal with that, meaning we haven't yet, as a society, realized that killing complete, whole human beings that are just smaller than us and don't live, out of the womb somehow makes us feel that we as privileged born people can discriminate against them and violently end their life. We haven't evolved enough to understand the horrificness of abortion.
It's 50 years or so for birth control. So I'm sort of worried that, hey, civilization, if we don't make enough people to at least sustain our numbers, perhaps increase a little bit, then civilization is going to crumble.
That's a stunning statement. That's not an accurate statement. It's not a fear-mongering statement. If you look at the numbers of youth, young people, millennials, my generation, Gen Z, who identify as LGBTQIA, many of whom then do not participate in heterosexual sexual behavior, it's like over 25% in some statistics of this generation identifying, where before it was like 3%. So if you have homosexual behavior that isn't procreative at all, if you have statistics out there now, which are clear as day, that this generation from the Pew Research Center just came out, it said it was actually pretty shocking. The majority of childless adults younger than 50 cite that they just don't want to have kids. 44% of childless individuals 18 to 49 say it's unlikely they will ever have children. 44%, almost half. And 56% said they just don't want to have kids. 56% of that 44%. If you have people who just don't want to have kids because it's cooler to have puppies that you wheel around in strollers, to go and do all your Instagram pictures of all your cool hiking places, and you don't want to have to share your life with a tiny human you're responsible for, if you're not engaging in heterosexual sexual behavior that leads to unique human life, if you're putting yourself or your children on birth control at the age of 12 or 13, hormonal birth control that literally alters how our girls' brains are wired, that we know can lead to infertility, if we're propagating chemical abortion drugs that kill human beings, our civilization will collapse. And the numbers that are out there, the numbers that Elon just said about what's happening in Japan, that's not just Japan. That's happening across our world. And it was happening in Europe for decades, and now it's here. It's here in America. We are below replacement value. This is a significant concern. Pro-choice and pro-life Americans should agree that we generally need to create and promote the creation of new human beings. What's the good of saving our earth? What's the good of protecting, our carbon emissions if we're not saving our earth for someone, the tiny little humans?
There's the old question of will civilization end with a bang or a whimper? Well, it's currently trying to end with a whimper in adult diapers.
Yes.
That's really sad. And that's why we'll actually sadly see more and more laws being promoted and passed for assisted suicide and euthanasia. That's what happened in Canada. Oh, assisted suicide is in euthanasia. Now they're passing laws that will allow the state to come in and euthanize individuals who, after all the pressure, still don't choose to kill themselves. And this is why we'll continue to see more and more laws introduced to promote assisted suicide and euthanasia, to get rid of these adults in diapers that we can't even afford to take care of, because there'll be so few people on Earth who can actually take care of them.
Well, it's currently trying to end with a whimper in adult diapers.
The most depressing.
I mean, seriously, yeah.
War is less depressing.
Yeah, I'd rather go out with a bang.
It is depressing as hell, Elon. I 100% agree with you.